Hello again and welcome back to this Python tutorial series. In the last video I taught you how to output from Python, and in this tutorial I will be teaching how to take inputs. At the end of the last video I asked you to make a program that would output the lines of your favourite poem, and here I have a program demonstrating how to do this. Here it is. It's a simple 3-line poem. As a matter of fact, I must confess I don't actually have a favourite poem. This is the Yongy Bongy Boo, or however that's pronounced, but the program still works. I've got each line as a separate print command, and then if I run module, save it, you see it outputs the poem line by line in the Python shell as required. Okay, so moving on, I'm going to teach you how to take inputs in Python. But first thing I need to introduce you to is something called variables, or there's also constants as well, but for the meantime we'll be concentrating on variables. If you know the word variable or constant, you probably have an idea of what they mean. When we use variables, it's when we assign a value to something in a program, and we can change that value as we go throughout the program. If this sounds confusing, don't worry, I'll demonstrate exactly how it works now. So let's save a new program, save as, and we'll call it lesson 2 inputs. Now, watch me as I type x equals input, open bracket, close bracket. And now, on the next line, I'll say print x. Okay, so x here is this thing that I've called a variable. And what that means is we're giving x a value, and then we're outputting that value of x. The value that x gets here is the value that the user inputs. So this is a new command called input. You see this is also purple, and the input command, you need open and close brackets at the end of it. You might see why in a future video, but for now you just need to know open bracket, close bracket at the end of input. And you will see that x here, which is the variable, is in black, so any variables you have will be shown as black. I don't mean to confuse you here, because you'll notice some other things in the program are also black coloured. So this equal signs and these open and close brackets, those are not variables, those are just other symbols in the language which are the same colour. The equal sign is used to give something a value. Now if you're used to maths, you should know what an equal sign means. Usually it means one side of the equation is equal to the other side, and you might want to solve the equation to find a value of something. In programming it's very different. What this means is whatever's on the left, we're giving it the value of what's on the right. Okay? So we've got this variable x, and we're assigning it the value of whatever the user inputs. So enough of me talking, let's run this program and see if it works. Run module. Yep, we're going to save it. Okay. Now, when this program is running in the shell, you'll see that nothing's happened. This is because it's waiting for the user input. Now, Python's just running the lines of code that you've put in there, and your first line is to take an input, so Python's waiting for an input. If a user was using a program, they wouldn't have a clue what's going on, they just think the program's not working, so that's why you've got to make sure you design your programs well so the user understands what's going on. But you'll get to grips with that once you've actually got to grips with programming in more detail. But for the time being, we're testing our own program, so we know we're going to expect an input. So let's say hello, and look at that. Python has outputted hello. You'll see outputs of the program are in blue, and this input is in black text in the shell. So that appears to be working. And moving back to the program, I'll show you a bit more about variables. They can take on any name that you want to give them. So I just call this one x, but you don't have to call it x. So don't go around memorizing x. It can be whatever you want. So you could call it my variable, and then print my variable. And if I run the module now, let's do the same thing again. You'll see it still works correctly because it's just printing the variable my variable, and Python knows what the value of this is because we just gave it a value. So go ahead, call it whatever you want, and check that the program works. But now watch this. Say I wanted to call the variable print. So print equals input, and then we're going to print this variable called print. and we'll see what happens. Run module. Okay, let's say hello. Oh, we just got an error here. Don't worry about what this means exactly. Just know that these red messages means there's an error and your program's not running properly. And I'll explain why this is. If you look at the variable that we called print, you'll notice that's gone purple as well. And the clever ones amongst you will realize, in fact you might think it's obvious, well that's because there's a command called print, so Python thinks you're just using the print command. You've got to remember, this is a computer, it's not a human, it can't just interpret what it thinks you mean, it's going to do exactly what it says there. So it's not going to be able to do this because the print command can't be carried out within a print command. What it's expecting here is a value to output, or a variable, the value of a variable, but it's just got the print command again, so it's going to have an error. So one thing you've got to make sure you do when you make your variable names is make sure that they are not the same name as a command in Python. And the reason you'll know this is if the variable name goes purple, that means it's a command, you're going to have to give it a different name. So I could call this print1 and then output print1, and if we run the module now, you'll see that it all works correctly. So the variable names can have a combination of letters and numbers, but it cannot be the name of a command, or it cannot just be a single number, as you'll see here. If I just do a single number, run module, it comes up with an error message, says syntax error. That means your program doesn't conform to the requirements of the language, so it can't run it. So just bear these things in mind. Now we're going to make a more interesting program using these commands that we've learnt. So we're going to ask for the user's name and we're going to output it. So first line, can you guess what we're going to do? Print. And then we'll say, what is your name? And don't forget the question mark for grammatical purposes. And then we'll take the import and we'll call the variable name, seeing as that's much more appropriate. So name equals input, and then we're going to print name. What is your name? Say Python, and then it outputs Python. Now we can make this a bit more interesting by printing it's nice to see you. And then it will print the name on the next line. So let's just call my name Puth for the sake of it, to make up for my typo. It's nice to see you, Puth, but that's on a separate line. We want it to be cleaner and have it on the same line. So to do that, what we're going to do is output this text and the variable on the same print line. Now the way you do this is at the end of the text you add plus and then type the name of the variable. So we can get rid of this line. You can add more to the end of this, so you could add another plus with more text, and then you can say comma, that's my name too. Full stop. Ooh, within the quotation marks, this is because we want to output the full stop because we are grammatical people here. Run module. What is your name? Python. It's nice to see Python, that's my name too. And as you'll notice, I actually put a space after the U, but before the quotation marks, so it outputs that space. If we don't do that, then it will just output the name directly after U, and it will merge the two together. So check this out. See, it doesn't automatically put a space between the text and the variable. You need to do that yourself. Okay, so I've covered a few new things in this tutorial. Introduced something called a variable and how to take inputs from the user. Now I'm going to leave you with a task. See if you can make a program which makes the user input their full name and then it outputs their full name but in reverse. So it takes in first name, middle name, surname, and then outputs surname, middle name, first name. And you can add a few little fun touches to it if you want, but just try and get that done for the next tutorial to make sure you're sort of understanding how this whole programming thing is working. Thank you for watching. Leave any comments if you need any questions answering on anything, or you just want to leave some feedback. In the next tutorial I will be teaching you how to carry out some processing on your data, because we've covered inputs and outputs. The next big thing is processing. And for this video's throwback to a previous video from this channel, I'm gonna go back in time to the first ever Blitz video I did. If you've just come across this channel from these Python tutorials, you might not even know what Blitz is. Blitz Basic is a programming language that's also used for beginners. If you want to learn how to program by writing games, you might want to check out this. This is from many years ago, so maybe I sounded a bit more clueless than I do now. Heck, maybe I even still sound clueless. But I started teaching programming by giving some example game programs, typing it through like I'm doing here, but I started a bit more advanced than I'm doing right now. This was actually the first ever video uploaded to this channel. It clocks in 3.5 minutes, and I actually made this back in 2009 it was, because I couldn't actually find any Blitz Plus tutorials on YouTube, and I thought it wasn't doing the language justice, so I thought I might as well make my own tutorials so people can learn how to do it. And I think it turned out okay, because I ended up doing loads more Blitz tutorials, so click the link if you want to check that one out. Otherwise, hope to see you next time in this Python tutorial series. Thanks for watching.